The hazy, smog-filtered Los Angeles sun was dipping below the skyline, smearing the sky in shades of bruised orange and purple when Veronica Sterling pointed the nose of her black Escalade out of the city. In the back, 9-year-old Chloe Hayes watched the blur of palm trees and concrete pass by with a mix of curiosity and a knot of dread in her stomach, her small body strapped securely into her wheelchair, a constant reminder of the horrific freeway pileup that had taken not only her mobility, but also her mother's life. "Where are we going, Veronica?" Chloe asked, her soft voice a small crack in the car's tense, air-conditioned silence. Veronica's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, her face a carefully constructed mask of calm. "It's a surprise, dear. You'll see." The hours bled into one another as the dense urban sprawl of L.A. gave way to the vast, empty expanse of the Mojave Desert. Chloe grew increasingly uneasy. Something felt deeply wrong. This promised scenic drive felt more like a relentless march into nothingness. "Veronica, I'm hungry," Chloe murmured, her blue eyes, so much like her late mother's, shimmering with unshed tears. "We're almost there," Veronica answered tersely, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, her gaze locked on the shimmering blacktop ahead. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of desert highway, Veronica slowed the Escalade, wrenching the wheel onto a barely there dirt road. The luxury vehicle bucked and shook violently, forcing Chloe to grip the arms of her wheelchair. After a few jarring minutes on the rough path, Veronica slammed on the brakes. "We're here," she announced, her voice unnervingly cold, stripped of all emotion. With movements that were precise and economical, Veronica got out and opened the rear hatch. Chloe heard the familiar clicks and snaps of her wheelchair being unfolded and assembled. Her heart hammered against her ribs, seized by a sudden primal fear. Veronica swung open the rear door and, with an efficiency that bordered on cruelty, transferred Chloe from the car seat to the wheelchair. Without a word, she pushed the chair a few yards down the dirt road, just far enough that the hulking silhouette of the Escalade was lost in the encroaching twilight. "Veronica?" Chloe called out, fear making her voice tremble. "What's going on? Why are we here?" Veronica knelt in front of Chloe, her eyes as hard and unforgiving as desert stones, devoid of the practiced tenderness the girl had known for the past few months. "Lisa, sweetheart, this is the end of the line for us. Your dad never should have married me. I wasn't born to be a mother, let alone to a child like you." Chloe's eyes widened, the shock of Veronica's words a physical blow that stole her breath. But you said you loved me? You promised you'd take care of me." "Sometimes people lie," Veronica answered coldly, her voice as sharp as a shard of ice. "Life isn't a fairy tale, Lisa. It's time you learned that." Chloe felt hot tears begin to course down her cheeks, her young mind reeling, unable to process the sheer cruelty of the moment. "Please, Veronica, don't do this. I promise I'll be better. I promise I won't be any trouble. Just don't leave me here." For a fleeting second, something akin to remorse flickered in Veronica's eyes, but it was extinguished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold resolve. She rose to her feet, turned her back, and walked toward the Escalade. "No, Veronica, please," Chloe cried, her voice strangled with despair. "I'm scared. Don't leave me alone." But Veronica didn't look back. She slipped into the driver's seat, started the engine, and gunned it, speeding away and leaving a choking cloud of dust in her wake. The sound of the powerful engine gradually faded until all Chloe could hear was the frantic pounding of her own heart and the unsettling nocturnal sounds of the vast, empty desert. Chloe remained there, alone in the deepening darkness, her cries swallowed by the immense emptiness of the night. The desert cold began to seep into her bones, and the once distant, harmless rustles of unseen creatures now seemed menacing and oppressive. Hours crawled by, an eternity of time. Chloe, unable to move or call for help, cycled between fits of gut-wrenching sobs and stunned, silent shock. Her young mind simply could not grasp the magnitude of the betrayal she had just experienced. "Daddy," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Daddy, please find me." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in a high-roller suite in Las Vegas, David Hayes slept soundly, exhausted after a long day of tense negotiations. He was blissfully unaware of the tragedy unfolding under the desert stars. The hotel phone rang, its shrill tones slicing through the stillness of the night. David stirred, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness, and fumbled for the receiver. "Hello?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Mr. Hayes?" The voice on the other end was tense, urgent. "This is Detective Reynolds from the LAPD, sir. I regret to inform you, but we have a situation. Your daughter Chloe is missing." The words hit David like a splash of ice water. He shot bolt upright in bed, all traces of drowsiness instantly gone. "What? How can she be missing? Where's Veronica?" "Your wife reported she took Chloe out for a drive yesterday afternoon, but they never returned home. Veronica claims Chloe was abducted when she stopped to fill up the car." David's world began to tilt and spin. A wave of nausea rose in his throat. This can't be happening. Are you sure? Have you checked everywhere?" "We're doing everything we can, Mr. Hayes," the detective assured him, "but we need you to come back immediately. Your presence may be crucial to the investigation." David could hardly breathe as the detective went on about the ongoing search and police procedures. His mind whirled, conjuring the worst-case scenarios. "I'm coming home right now," David managed to say, his voice trembling. "Please, find my daughter. Please." As soon as he hung up, David sank to his knees on the plush carpet, tears streaming down his face. "Chloe," he whispered. "My God, Chloe, what happened to you?" With shaking hands, he began to throw his things into a suitcase, his mind a chaotic jumble of fear and suffocating guilt. How could he have left Chloe behind? How could he have trusted Veronica so blindly, a woman he'd known for such a short time? While David scrambled to catch the first flight back to Los Angeles, Veronica stood in the cavernous living room of their Beverly Hills mansion, rehearsing her kidnapping story. She had spent hours crafting a plausible narrative, practicing tearful and desperate expressions in a floor-to-ceiling mirror. "I only turned away for a second," she muttered, fake tears glistening in her eyes. "When I realized what had happened, she was gone. Oh God, how could I let this happen?" Veronica knew the next few days would be critical. She would have to maintain the facade of a devastated stepmother, skillfully navigating the police investigation and the inevitable public scrutiny. But she felt confident in her plan. After all, who would suspect a woman who had so publicly spent the last few months caring for a disabled child? What Veronica did not know, what she could never have predicted, was that her cruel act that night would set off a chain of events that would ultimately bring about her own downfall. She had no way of foreseeing the fierce determination of a father to find his child, nor the incredible resilience of a little girl who refused to give up. As the night wore on, 3 lives were on drastically different paths. Chloe, alone and terrified on a dark road, fighting the cold and her fear. David, crossing state lines, driven by desperation and a flicker of hope. And Veronica, at home, weaving a web of lies she believed was impenetrable. The day that changed everything was not merely the day of Chloe's cruel abandonment. It was the day Veronica's true nature was revealed, the day David's unwavering trust in his new wife was violently shattered, and the day Chloe, an innocent child, was forced to confront the cruelty of the world in a way no child ever should. The consequences of that day would stretch on for years, testing the limits of love, trust, and everyone's capacity for forgiveness. And though none of them could have known it at the time, it was the start of a journey that would take them places they never imagined, both physically and emotionally. Dawn's gentle light was just beginning to color the vast Montana sky when Martha Marty Johnson, a 62-year-old retired nurse, stepped out for her morning walk. The crisp mountain air and the distant call of a bird were a balm to her spirit, part of a routine she'd established since moving to the small, peaceful town of Harmony Creek after decades of stressful work in a bustling city hospital. Marty was strolling contentedly along a dirt road, savoring the countryside's hush, when something unusual drew her notice. In the distance, she spotted what looked like a wheelchair. Curious and slightly concerned, Marty picked up her pace. The sight that met her eyes made her heart clench. A young girl, just a child, sat in the chair, trembling, her tear-streaked face fixed on Marty with mingled hope and fear. "Oh, my goodness," Marty murmured, hurrying over to the child. "Sweetheart, are you all right? What happened?" The girl merely stared, her lips trembling. As Marty knelt beside her, the child finally spoke, her voice little more than a hoarse whisper. Cold. Scared. Without hesitation, Marty took off her fleece jacket and draped it over the girl's shoulders. "Don't worry, honey. You're safe now. I'll take care of you." Gently, Marty began pushing the wheelchair back towards her cozy cabin. The girl stayed silent throughout the walk, letting out the occasional hitching sob. Once inside, Marty carefully settled the child on the couch, bundling her in warm blankets and preparing a mug of hot chocolate. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Marty asked softly, offering the steaming mug. The girl paused, her eyes flooding with tears again. "Chloe," she finally whispered. "Chloe," Marty repeated, smiling warmly. "That's a lovely name. Can you tell me what happened? Where are your parents?" But Chloe only shook her head, tears running freely down her cheeks. "Veronica, she left me alone." Marty felt a surge of cold anger as she imagined someone abandoning a child, especially one with special needs. She knew she had to act swiftly. "Chloe, dear, I'm going to call the hospital, okay? We need to make sure everything's all right." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Paramedics arrived, examined Chloe, and took her to the small local hospital. Marty insisted on accompanying her, refusing to let the girl be alone for a second. At the hospital, the doctors were baffled. Chloe had no new injuries but was clearly traumatized. More troubling was that there were no records of her in the system, no missing child reports, no children matching her description in local or national databases. "It's as if she just appeared out of nowhere," Dr. Williams said, frowning over the test results. Marty sat at Chloe's bedside, holding the child's small hand as she slept, exhausted by her ordeal. "So, what happens now?" Marty asked the doctor. "Well, we'll need to notify social services," he replied. "Until we learn more about her situation, she'll need a place to stay." Marty didn't hesitate. "She can stay with me," she said firmly. "I'm a retired nurse. I can take care of her." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, David Hayes was living a waking nightmare. Since returning in a rush from his business trip, he'd barely slept or eaten. His days were consumed by frantic searches, endless discussions with the police, and desperate public pleas. At night, when Chloe's absence became an unbearable physical weight, David would turn to drink. Whiskey dulled the pain, softening the razor-sharp edges of guilt eating away at him. How could he have allowed this to happen? How had he failed so terribly in protecting his only child? Veronica, for her part, played the role of heartbroken wife and stepmother to perfection. She organized search parties, gave tearful interviews to the local press, and comforted David in his darkest moments. Inside, however, she reveled. Her plan had worked perfectly. Chloe was out of her life, and she now had both David and his company, Hayes Industries, in the palm of her hand. Back in the small Montana town, Marty faced challenges of her own. Taking care of Chloe proved difficult, but intensely rewarding. The child spoke little, communicating mostly through gestures and facial expressions. Marty learned to read every slight signal, anticipating Chloe's needs before she voiced them. Nights were especially hard. Chloe suffered from frequent nightmares, waking up screaming, her small body trembling with fear. Marty would spend hours by Chloe's bedside, quietly singing and stroking her hair until the girl fell back to sleep. During the day, Marty adapted her home to meet Chloe's needs. She installed ramps, lowered light switches, and rearranged furniture to accommodate the wheelchair. Every tiny step forward, an extra smile, a new word, was a victory that Marty cherished. The local community, moved by Chloe's story and impressed by Marty's selfless dedication, rallied around them. Neighbors brought homemade meals, toys, and clothes for Chloe. The local carpenter offered to build a small lift for the bathroom. A retired teacher volunteered to tutor Chloe at home. Gradually, Chloe began to open up. Hesitant words formed short sentences. Shy smiles became more frequent. She still had moments of deep sadness, times she would softly call for her father, but Marty was always there to comfort her. Meanwhile, David's life was spiraling downward. His work performance at Hayes Industries suffered, and he started missing critical meetings. The drinking, initially a nighttime escape, now accompanied him into the day. He hid bottles of bourbon in his office, taking furtive sips between calls and emails. Veronica, eyeing an opportunity, began taking on more responsibilities at the company. She attended meetings on David's behalf, made important decisions, and gradually became indispensable to the organization's operation. "You need rest, darling," she would tell David, her voice brimming with false concern. "Let me handle things for now. You just focus on finding Chloe." David, crushed by guilt and dulled by alcohol, barely noticed what was happening around him. His life had been reduced to one singular mission: finding Chloe. Everything else, his job, his health, his marriage, was secondary. Weeks turned into months. In the small Montana town, Chloe continued adapting to her new life with Marty. Though she still had moments of confusion and sorrow, she drew comfort from the daily routine and the unfailing affection of her caregiver. Marty, watching Chloe's progress, felt both joy and apprehension. Somewhere out there, a family was searching for this girl. But the idea of losing Chloe, of sending her back to a world that had hurt her so deeply, was nearly unthinkable. One night, as Marty was tucking Chloe into bed, the girl grabbed her hand. "Grandma Marty," she said softly, using the nickname she had adopted for her caregiver. "Will you send me away?" Marty's heart clenched. "No, sweetheart," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You can stay here as long as you like. This is your home now." As Chloe fell asleep with a small smile on her lips, Marty made a silent promise. She would protect this child, no matter the cost. She would give Chloe the love, security, and stability she deserved. What Marty didn't know, what no one could predict, was that fate had other plans. The road ahead would be long and full of twists, testing the limits of love, loyalty, and resilience for everyone involved. But for now, in that little home in a quiet rural town, a new family had formed, forged in the warmth of compassion and strengthened by the power of unconditional love. Meanwhile, back in the big city, Veronica continued her manipulative game. With David increasingly absent and dependent on alcohol, she assumed nearly full control of the company. Her ambition, once discreet, was now on full display. She was ruthless in business, striking bold deals and making decisions that surprised even the most seasoned executives. David, in his moments of lucidity, sensed something was off, but the pain of losing Chloe and the numbing comfort of alcohol prevented him from taking action. He had become a shadow of the man he once was, appearing at the office only occasionally, his red-rimmed eyes and disheveled appearance silently attesting to his suffering. Over time, Chloe's story, the mysterious girl found on the roadside, began circulating beyond the small town. Local newspapers published articles, and soon the story caught national media attention. Sketches of Chloe were distributed, along with pleas for any information on her identity. Marty observed all this with mixed emotions. Part of her wanted Chloe to find her real family, but another part feared losing the child who had become the center of her life. Fate, however, had its own designs. One ordinary morning, as David listlessly flipped through the newspaper in his office, his eyes fell upon a tiny note about a young, unidentified girl found months earlier. The description made his heart stop. With trembling hands, he picked up the phone. It was time for the truth to emerge, and the lives of everyone involved were about to change forever. Dawn brought with it a symphony of rural sounds, the crowing of roosters, the distant lowing of cows, the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. For Chloe, once foreign, these sounds now felt familiar and comforting. Seated in her wheelchair by the bedroom window, she watched the world awaken with curious, alert eyes. Marty entered the room, carrying the scent of fresh coffee and toast. "Good morning, sweetheart. Ready for another day?" Chloe nodded, a small smile curving her lips. "Can we go see the chickens today?" The simple request made Marty's heart leap with joy. Over the past few weeks, Chloe had shown a growing interest in the world around her, especially the farm animals next door. "Of course we can, my love. After breakfast, we'll head over." As the days passed, Chloe spoke more and more. Her once short, hesitant sentences became more elaborate. She asked about the plants in the garden, about how the farm worked, about the names of the stars that dotted the night sky. Yet any mention of her past was deftly avoided, her eyes clouding with a sorrow that broke Marty's heart. Marty, for her part, threw herself into adapting her home and routine for Chloe. Ramps were installed, furniture was rearranged, and a daily schedule was set to provide structure and comfort. Every little triumph, a new movement, a new word, a spontaneous smile, was celebrated like a major milestone. At the neighboring farm, Chloe discovered a fascinating new world. She spent hours observing the chickens, laughing at their clumsy gait and the way they pecked the ground in search of food. The rabbits, with their twitchy noses and soft ears, became her silent confidants. "Hi, Mr. Fluffy Ears," Chloe whispered to one particularly large, furry rabbit. "Do you ever have bad dreams too?" Marty watched these interactions with a mixture of tenderness and concern. It was clear that Chloe found solace in the animals, perhaps because they offered companionship without expectations or difficult questions. Kim Green, the social worker assigned to Chloe's case, made regular visits. She observed Chloe's progress with professional eyes, but couldn't help being moved by the obvious bond between the girl and Marty. "She's adapting well," Kim remarked on one of her visits, "but we still haven't found any leads on her identity or family." Marty nodded, a lump in her throat. The thought of losing Chloe to an unknown family weighed heavily on her, though she knew she had to keep the child's best interests at heart. It was on a rainy afternoon that Chloe discovered painting. Marty had set up a small table with paper and paints, hoping it would offer a distraction from the dismal weather. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. Chloe dove into the world of colors with a fervor Marty had never seen. Her movements, typically limited by her paralysis, seemed to flow with a new grace as she guided the brush across the paper. Hours passed, and when Chloe finally leaned back, Marty was stunned by what she saw. The painting was vivid and charged with emotion, a whirlwind of dark colors dotted with small points of light, like stars in a stormy night. There was a depth to it that seemed impossible for a child so young. "Chloe, this is amazing," Marty whispered, genuinely impressed. Chloe looked at the painting, then at Marty, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and vulnerability. "It's how I feel inside sometimes," she said softly. At that moment, Marty realized art was not just a pastime for Chloe. It was a language, a way to express the emotions she couldn't put into words. In the days that followed, Marty rearranged Chloe's routine to include more art time. She researched home education programs, focusing especially on visual arts. Kim, upon seeing Chloe's talent, helped connect them with resources and specialized programs. While Chloe blossomed in her new environment, David's life continued its downward spiral. His nights of heavy drinking began to impact his work more noticeably. He arrived late to meetings when he showed up at all, often with bloodshot eyes and breath that revealed his addiction. "Mr. Hayes, is everything all right?" one of the investors asked after a particularly disastrous presentation. David forced a smile, sweat trickling down his back. Of course. Just a bad night's sleep. You know how it is." But everyone knew better. The whispers in the corridors, the pitying looks, the disapproving expressions, they all weighed on David, pushing him deeper into the bottle. Veronica, on the other hand, seemed to thrive amid the chaos. She smoothly picked up the responsibilities David dropped, impressing clients and colleagues with her efficiency and charm. Her ambition, once carefully hidden, now shone in plain sight. "Don't worry, darling," she told David, her voice a blend of compassion and condescension. "I'll handle everything. You just need to focus on feeling better." What Veronica couldn't have known, what never even crossed her mind, was that hundreds of miles away, the girl she had abandoned was not only alive, but beginning to thrive. One particularly productive afternoon, Chloe painted a series of pictures: sunlit fields dotted with daisies, a night sky brimming with stars, and a surprisingly detailed portrait of Marty. "They're beautiful, Chloe," Marty praised, her heart swelling with pride. "You are truly gifted." Chloe smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "Thank you, Grandma Marty. I feel happy when I paint." That night, as Marty tucked Chloe into bed, she couldn't help but ponder the future. Chloe's artistic talent was undeniable, but what if someone recognized her? What if her real family showed up to take her away? Grandma Marty? Chloe's sleepy voice cut through her thoughts. "Yes, sweetheart, I love you." 3 simple words, yet they meant the world. Marty felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too, my little artist." As Chloe drifted off to sleep, Marty made a silent promise. Whatever the future held, she would do everything possible to protect and nurture Chloe's gift. This extraordinary child deserved every opportunity the world could offer. What Marty did not know was that fate was already in motion. Chloe's paintings, so full of feeling and talent, would be the key to unlocking the mystery of her past. And soon, very soon, the separate worlds of Chloe, Marty, David, and Veronica would collide in ways none of them could predict. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains of Chloe's bedroom, illuminating an easel where a blank canvas patiently awaited. Now 8 years old, Chloe sat in her adapted wheelchair, her eyes bright with anticipation. Her hands, once hesitant, now moved with confidence as she selected her brushes. "So, what are you going to paint today, sweetheart?" Marty asked, entering the room with a breakfast tray. Chloe smiled, lighting up her entire face. "Something I saw in a dream, Grandma Marty." It was a car, but it was flying. Marty felt a tug at her heart. In recent months, Chloe's paintings had become increasingly vivid, sometimes disturbing. Overturned cars, dark roads, ominous figures. Marty suspected they were fragments of Chloe's repressed memories. As Chloe focused on her new piece, Marty reflected on how far they had come. Chloe's artistic gifts had blossomed in an extraordinary way, evolving from simple, colorful scribbles into complex, emotionally charged paintings that left viewers in awe. Word of the young art prodigy in the small Montana town spread quickly. Neighbors, friends, even strangers began showing up at Marty's home, curious to see the works of the little artist in the wheelchair, as some affectionately called her. "She has a special gift," commented Mrs. Johnson, the town's retired art teacher, after examining one of Chloe's paintings. "There's an emotional depth in her work that's rare, even for adult artists." Though Marty swelled with pride at these compliments, she also felt a sense of dread. The more attention Chloe received, the higher the risk someone would recognize her, bringing her past crashing back down. Chloe, on the other hand, seemed to flourish under the growing attention. She spoke more openly now, enthusiastically describing her paintings, though she still avoided any direct mention of her past. This one, Chloe explained to Kim during a routine visit, pointing to a somber painting of a deserted road, is about feeling lonely. But see, there's a light at the end. That's hope. Kim studied the painting carefully, noting subtle details. The outline of a wheelchair almost hidden in the shadows, the distant figure that might be a woman walking away. Chloe, your paintings are incredible. They tell a story, don't they? Chloe nodded, her eyes momentarily darkening. Sometimes when I paint, I see things. I remember things, but it's confusing. Marty and Kim exchanged troubled looks. Clearly, Chloe's art was becoming a window into her traumatic past. Encouraged by Chloe's talent and wanting to celebrate her progress, Marty decided to host a small exhibition at the local community center. The church hall was transformed into an improvised gallery, the walls adorned with Chloe's vibrant creations. On the day of the exhibition, the small town buzzed with excitement. Residents of all ages gathered to admire Chloe's work, leaving messages of support and praise in a guest book. Chloe, dressed in her best outfit with flowers in her hair, was the center of attention. She answered questions with a blend of shyness and pride, her eyes shining whenever someone complimented one of her pieces. "How do you capture so much emotion in your paintings, Chloe?" asked a reporter from the local paper. Chloe hesitated, glancing at Marty for reassurance. I paint what I feel. Sometimes it's happy things, like fields of flowers or a starry sky." She paused, dropping her voice to a near whisper. "Other times, it's things that scare me, but painting them makes them less scary." The reporter nodded sympathetically, taking quick notes. Marty, watching from nearby, felt a mix of pride and worry. Chloe was opening up, but each word about her past was like crossing a minefield. While Chloe's art show garnered positive attention hundreds of miles away, David Hayes was fighting his own battle. Sitting in his office, he stared at the half-empty whiskey bottle on his desk, wrestling with the urge to pour another glass. "Mr. Hayes?" His secretary's voice snapped him out of his dark reverie. "Mr. Jameson from Midwest Corp is here for the meeting." David felt a surge of panic. The meeting with Midwest Corp, how could he have forgotten? It was a multi-million-dollar contract, vital to the company. Hands shaking, he straightened his tie and tried to pull himself together. "Send him in," he said, his voice hoarse. From the start, the meeting was a disaster. David stammered, lost his train of thought, and nearly spilled his coffee more than once. Mr. Jameson watched with a mix of confusion and disapproval. "Mr. Hayes," Jameson finally interjected, cutting off a particularly muddled explanation. "Perhaps it would be best if we reschedule this meeting for another day, when you're more prepared." David tasted bitter shame on his tongue. "Mr. Jameson, I can explain." But Jameson was already standing, gathering his papers. "We'll be in touch," he said coolly, leaving the room. David sank into his chair, the reality of how close he was to losing everything finally hitting home. He needed help. He knew it, but the thought of confronting his pain, the failure to protect Chloe, without the numbness of alcohol, was terrifying. Back at Chloe's exhibition, Kim examined the girls' paintings with a professional eye. As a social worker, she had seen many traumatized children express themselves through art, but Chloe's work was exceptional. "Marty," Kim called, beckoning the older woman closer. "Have you considered using Chloe's paintings as a form of therapy, or maybe as a clue to finding out more about her past?" Marty bit her lip, thoughtful. "I've considered it, yes. But I'm afraid of pushing Chloe. She still gets so scared when we talk directly about before." Kim nodded understandingly. "I see your concern, but look at this painting." She pointed to a piece showing a dark road, a single car in the distance, and part of a license plate visible. These could be real clues. A shiver ran down Marty's spine. The idea of using Chloe's art to uncover her past was both exciting and frightening. What if they discovered something Chloe wasn't ready to face? "What do you suggest?" Marty asked, keeping her voice low so Chloe, who was happily chatting with visitors, wouldn't overhear. "We could start slowly," Kim replied. "Maybe bring in a therapist specialized in art therapy, someone who can help Chloe process what she's expressing in her paintings without pressuring her." Marty nodded slowly. "All right. But Chloe's well-being comes first. The moment it feels like too much for her, we'll stop immediately," Kim finished, offering a reassuring smile. As the two women discussed next steps, Chloe kept enchanting visitors with her enthusiastic explanations about each painting. Her smile was radiant, her eyes gleamed with new confidence. Observing from a short distance, Marty felt an overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness. Chloe had come such a long way since that terrifying night on the road. She was no longer just the girl in the wheelchair or the little artist. She was a survivor, a creator, a shining light in a world that could often be dark. Whatever the future held for Chloe remained uncertain, but in that moment, surrounded by her art and the warmth of her adoptive community, she was thriving. And Marty silently vowed to do everything in her power to ensure that Chloe kept shining, no matter what fate had in store. The small-town community center was abuzz with anticipation. Dozens of artworks by local artists of all ages adorned walls and stands. At the center of it all, a wheelchair moved smoothly among the exhibits, its young occupant taking in everything with bright, eager eyes. Chloe, now 8, had entered the local art contest after much prodding from Marty and Kim. Her painting, a vivid and moving portrait of a lonely girl in a field of sunflowers, stood out among the other entries. And first place in the youth category goes to Chloe Thompson for Hope in Yellow, the head judge announced, his voice echoing through the hall. A brief hush was followed by an explosion of applause. Marty, tears in her eyes, pushed Chloe's wheelchair up to the makeshift stage. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Marty whispered, leaning down to hug Chloe. "I'm so proud of you." Chloe, her cheeks flushed with excitement, accepted the small trophy and a symbolic check. When the judge offered her the microphone, she hesitated briefly before speaking. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but clear. I paint because it helps me understand things. Sometimes, when I can't say the words, I can paint the feelings." A ripple of approval flowed through the audience. Kim, watching from nearby, noted the pride shining in Marty's eyes, as well as a hint of worry. The social worker knew that the more Chloe expressed herself through art, the closer they came to uncovering her mysterious past. While Chloe celebrated her victory hundreds of miles away in the Hayes Industries boardroom, the atmosphere could not have been more different. David Hayes, bloodshot eyes and trembling hands, tried to maintain his composure as he faced the board of directors. The scent of alcohol on his breath was noticeable, even from a distance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice unsteady, "last quarter's numbers were... He trailed off, losing his train of thought. The silence in the room was palpable, broken only by the nervous tapping of pens on notepads. Veronica, seated to David's right, stepped in smoothly. "What David means to say is that despite recent challenges, our company maintained a steady 3% growth over the last quarter." Board members exchanged worried glances. It was no secret that David had struggled since his daughter's disappearance, but seeing him in such a state at a crucial meeting was shocking. "Mr. Hayes," the board president finally spoke, "perhaps we should take a recess." David, suddenly lucid, agreed. Yes, a recess would be good. The moment the door closed behind the last board member, Veronica turned to David, her gaze steely. "This can't go on, David," she said, her voice a mix of frustration and feigned concern. "You're destroying everything you've built." David slumped in his chair, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. "I know, Veronica, I know, but without Chloe, I don't know how to keep going." Veronica seized the opportunity. Maybe it's time to step back, David, for the sake of the company and for your own sake." In the days that followed, Veronica skillfully orchestrated David's temporary removal. At an emergency board meeting, she made a compelling case for assuming the role of interim CEO. David needs time to recover, she argued, her voice laden with false compassion, and the company needs stable leadership. I can provide that while we support David through his recovery. Concerned about the company's stability and public image, the board agreed unanimously. Within days, Veronica found herself in almost total control of Hayes Industries. While Veronica celebrated her rise to power in her new office, Marty faced challenges of her own. A persistent cough and growing fatigue prompted her to undergo a series of medical tests. "Mrs. Johnson," Dr. Williams said, his expression grave as he reviewed the results, "I'm afraid the tests show early signs of lung cancer." Marty felt the ground fall away beneath her. "Cancer," she whispered, her mind instantly going to Chloe. "But Chloe? She needs me." The doctor placed a comforting hand on Marty's shoulder. "We've detected it early, Marty. With proper treatment, your chances are good, but you need to take care of yourself." That night, after tucking Chloe into bed, Marty sat in her favorite armchair, her thoughts in turmoil. How could she care for Chloe while undergoing treatment? And if something happened to her, what would become of Chloe? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound coming from Chloe's room. Rising, Marty went to check on the girl. Chloe was sitting up in bed, clutching a framed photo of Marty. Silent tears streamed down her face. "Chloe, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Marty asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Chloe lifted her eyes, her expression a mix of fear and resolve. "Grandma Marty, are you going to leave me like the other woman did?" Marty's heart nearly stopped. It was the first time Chloe had directly referenced her abandonment. "Oh, my love," Marty whispered, pulling Chloe into a tight embrace. "I would never, ever leave you. I promise." Chloe nestled into the hug, but her next words caught Marty by surprise. Sometimes I dream about a man. He has eyes like mine and always looks sad. Do you think he's my dad?" Marty felt a lump form in her throat. She knew this moment would arrive, but she was still unprepared. "It's possible, sweetheart. Do you remember anything else about him?" Chloe frowned, concentrating. He used to call me Princess, and there was a smell, like the papers Mr. Johnson burned sometimes." Marty nodded, her heart heavy. The smell Chloe described sounded suspiciously like alcohol. "Chloe, you know you can tell me anything, right? About your dreams, your memories, anything." Chloe nodded, her eyes drooping with exhaustion. "I know, Grandma Marty. I love you." "I love you too, my little artist," Marty replied, tucking Chloe back under the covers. As she watched Chloe drift off, Marty realized they were entering new territory. Chloe's questions about her past were only the beginning. With her own diagnosis looming like a dark cloud, Marty wondered how she would navigate these turbulent waters. Across town, Kim, the social worker, pored over Chloe's latest paintings. One in particular caught her eye. A depiction of a man in a suit, alone in a dark office with a bottle in front of him. The resemblance to Chloe was unmistakable. Kim picked up the phone, her mind racing with possibilities. It was time to intensify the search for Chloe's true identity. She didn't realize her actions were about to set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. As night fell, 4 souls, separated by distance and circumstance, confronted their own struggles. Chloe, dreaming of a past she could barely recall. Marty, determined to protect her girl even while facing her own mortality. David, sinking further into guilt and alcohol. And Veronica, relishing her triumph, oblivious to the fact that her past was about to catch up with her. Fate, always unpredictable, was preparing to weave these loose threads into a pattern no one could have anticipated. The autumn sun cast a golden glow over the central square of the small town, lighting up the colorful stalls of the annual Arts and Crafts Fair. Among the strolling visitors, Emma Carter, a local journalist for the Messenger Daily, searched for a story that might spark interest for her next piece. That's when she saw it. In a modest booth at the corner of the square, a series of paintings immediately caught her eye. These were not the typical works you'd expect at a small-town fair, no pastoral landscapes or still lives. These were different, emotionally charged, technically impressive, and, surprisingly, all created by a young artist in a wheelchair. Emma approached, watching Chloe, who was busy explaining one of her paintings to an interested couple. This one, Chloe was saying, her voice soft yet confident, is about how sometimes we feel lost, but there's still hope. She pointed to a small point of light in an otherwise gloomy scene on the canvas. Emma waited patiently until the couple left before introducing herself. "Hello, I'm Emma Carter from the Messenger Daily. Your paintings are incredible. Would you mind chatting a bit about them?" Chloe looked to Marty, who was nearby, seeking approval. With a reassuring smile from her guardian, Chloe nodded. "Sure, I'd love to." Over the next hour, Emma was captivated not only by Chloe's artistic talent, but also by her story. The girl spoke eloquently about her inspirations and techniques, but when Emma tried to ask about her past or how she ended up in town, Chloe visibly withdrew. I don't remember very well," Chloe murmured, averting her eyes. "Grandma Marty found me and took care of me." Marty, sensing Chloe's discomfort, gently intervened. "Chloe has been through so much, Ms. Carter. Some things are just hard to talk about." Emma nodded sympathetically, but her journalist instincts were on full alert. There was a story here, she could feel it. A gifted young artist with a mysterious past was journalistic gold. "I completely understand," Emma said, offering Chloe a kind smile. "How about we focus on your amazing talent? I'd love to write an article about you, if you're interested." Chloe's eyes lit up at the idea, but Marty seemed hesitant. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," she began. "Please, Grandma Marty," Chloe pleaded. "Maybe more people will see my paintings." Marty sighed, unable to resist Chloe's excitement. "All right, but we'll have to set some boundaries, Ms. Carter." Emma readily agreed, already envisioning her headline. Over the following days, Emma spent hours with Chloe and Marty, watching Chloe paint, discussing her art and her life in the small town. She was impressed by Chloe's maturity and depth of emotion, far beyond her years. Meanwhile, Kim, the social worker, was in her office, carefully examining photos of Chloe's most recent paintings. One in particular, a lonely car on a dark road with a small figure in the foreground, caught her attention. The details were astonishingly specific. "This can't be a coincidence," Kim muttered to herself. She picked up the phone, resolved to reopen the investigation into Chloe's past. The paintings might be the key to unlocking the mystery. Hundreds of miles away, at the headquarters of Hayes Industries, Veronica was busy consolidating her power as interim CEO. Endless meetings, contract negotiations, and press interviews filled her days. She barely had time to think about David, who was in a rehabilitation clinic, let alone the little girl she had abandoned so long ago. The irony that Chloe's artistic gift was about to shake Veronica's carefully constructed world was completely lost on her. David, meanwhile, struggled daily with his demons in rehab. The therapy sessions were brutal, forcing him to confront the guilt and despair that had driven him to drink. Slowly, day by day, he began to regain a bit of clarity. One such morning, more lucid than usual, David picked up a local newspaper, something he hadn't done in months. His eyes skimmed the headlines without much interest until a small note in the art section grabbed his attention. "Young artistic prodigy enchants a local town," read the headline. The accompanying photo showed a girl in a wheelchair, smiling timidly at the camera. David's heart nearly stopped. "Chloe," he whispered, hands shaking as he brought the newspaper closer. Could it really be her? Emma's article on Chloe in the Messenger Daily had quickly gone viral. The Art of Overcoming. The incredible journey of Chloe Thompson captured the public's imagination, shared endlessly on social media, and picked up by larger outlets. Marty watched with a mix of pride and trepidation as the phone rang ceaselessly with interview requests and gallery offers. "I'm not sure we were prepared for this, Chloe," she said, concerned. Chloe, however, seemed to bloom under the attention. "It's okay, Grandma Marty," she reassured her. Maybe someone who knew me before will see me and recognize me." The story reached its peak of popularity when a national TV network decided to do a live segment on Chloe. It was during this broadcast that fate finally intervened. David, now in his last days at the rehab clinic in Malibu, was sitting in the common room, watching the news. His eyes widened when he saw Chloe on screen, talking about her art. "Chloe," he gasped, his heart pounding. There was no mistaking it. This was his daughter, alive. With trembling hands, he picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. After 3 rings, a deep voice answered. Detective Reynolds speaking. "Mike, it's David Hayes," he said urgently. "I need your help. I think I've found my daughter." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "David, it's been a while. Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely," David insisted, his voice shaking. "She's alive, Mike, and I need to find her." Mike sighed. He knew David's story well, having worked on Chloe's disappearance years earlier. "All right, David, tell me everything you know." David poured out the details he had, his voice trembling with emotion. "She's in a small town, Mike, living with a woman named Marty. She paints? And her paintings? Mike, they're unbelievable, so full of emotion and pain." Mike listened carefully, jotting down notes. "And you're absolutely certain it's her, after all this time?" "I'd recognize my daughter anywhere, Mike," David said firmly. "Her eyes, they look just like her mother's. There's no doubt in my mind." "All right," Mike said, his tone turning professional. "I'll start investigating immediately. I'll need the name of the town, that Marty's full name, and any other detail you can give me." David provided every scrap of information he'd gathered from the article and broadcast, his heart racing with a mixture of hope and dread. "David," Mike cautioned, "you need to understand something. If this really is Chloe, things might get complicated. She's built a new life. She has new people caring for her. We can't just show up and take her away from that." David felt a knot in his throat. "I know, Mike. I need to see her. I need to know she's okay." "I understand," Mike replied. "I'll move as fast as I can. But David, please don't do anything rash. Let me investigate first." All right, David conceded reluctantly. "Just keep me posted, please." "I will," Mike promised. "And David, it's good to hear you sober again." David managed a faint smile. "Thanks, Mike, for everything." After hanging up, David sat for a long moment, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. His daughter, whom he had thought lost forever, was alive. She had grown, developed an incredible talent, and seemingly found a new family. A whirlwind of emotions flooded him. Joy, relief, guilt, fear. What would Chloe think of him after all these years? Would she forgive him for not finding her sooner? And what would Veronica say when she found out? Veronica? The name of his wife brought a wave of nausea. How would he explain to her that Chloe was found? And why, a small voice at the back of his mind asked, had Veronica never seemed as devastated as he was about Chloe's disappearance? David shook his head, pushing those thoughts aside for the moment. The important thing was that Chloe was alive, and he had found her. Everything else could be sorted out later. With a resolve he hadn't felt in years, David stood. There was much to do. Complete his treatment, prepare for reuniting with Chloe, and eventually confront Veronica. "I'm coming, Chloe," he whispered to himself. Daddy's coming. What David did not know was that his quest to find Chloe would set in motion a series of events that would shake the foundations of many lives. The truth, long buried, was about to surface, and none of them, David, Veronica, Marty, and certainly not Chloe, were truly prepared for the revelations ahead. Detective Mike Reynolds' office was a maze of files and newspaper clippings when David Hayes entered, a week after their initial call. The air smelled of strong coffee, and the tension of an ongoing investigation hung tangibly in the room. "David," Mike greeted him, standing to shake the hand of a man who looked like he had aged 10 years in just a few days. "Have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." David settled into a worn leather chair, his eyes roving hungrily over the papers scattered across the desk. "What did you find out, Mike? Where is my Chloe?" Mike sighed, picking up a thick folder. "We've got good leads, David. The article you saw was just the start. Chloe Thompson, as she's known now, has become something of a local sensation in the small town of Harmony Creek." He opened the folder, revealing local newspaper clippings, photos of an arts fair, and, to David's heart-stopping delight, multiple images of Chloe, shyly smiling at the camera, concentrating on a painting, laughing with an older woman David assumed was Marty. "She looks happy," David whispered, gently touching one of the photos. Mike nodded. "From what we've gathered, she's had a good life with Martha Johnson, the woman who found her. Marty is a retired nurse, no criminal record, well regarded in the community." David felt a conflicted blend of gratitude and envy. Someone had cared for Chloe when he couldn't, given her the love and stability he failed to provide. "But how, Mike?" David asked, his voice ragged. "How did she end up there? What happened that night?" Mike's brow furrowed as he pulled out another file. "This is where it gets complicated, David." According to the records, Marty found Chloe abandoned on a rural road near Harmony Creek. She was alone, terrified, unable to give many details about her past. David felt a wave of nausea. The image of little Chloe, abandoned and terrified, was almost too much to bear. But who would do that? Mike hesitated for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "David, I need you to be completely honest with me. On the day Chloe disappeared, where exactly were you?" David blinked, startled. "Me? I was on a business trip in Las Vegas." "You know that, Mike. It was documented in the original investigation." Mike nodded slowly. "And Veronica? Where was she?" A heavy silence fell. David felt his heart pound, a terrible suspicion forming in his mind. "Veronica. She was at home with Chloe. She told me she took Chloe for a drive and that she was kidnapped at a gas station." Mike leaned forward, his expression grave. "David, we found no record of an abduction reported in that area on the date in question. And the location where Chloe was found, well, it doesn't match Veronica's story." David felt as though the ground was dissolving beneath him. "You're implying that Veronica—" "No, she wouldn't do that. She loved Chloe." Mike exhaled heavily. "David, I know it's hard to accept, but we have to consider all possibilities. Veronica had exclusive access to Chloe that day, and her story doesn't hold up under scrutiny." David shot to his feet, pacing the cramped office. His mind reeled with the implications of Mike's words. Veronica, his wife, the woman who had supported him through his grief. Could she really have done something so monstrous? "What now?" David finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mike stood, placing a reassuring hand on David's shoulder. "We keep investigating. I'm sending one of my best people to Harmony Creek to ask discreet questions. Meanwhile, David, I need you to stay calm and act normal. If Veronica really is responsible, we don't want to tip her off." David nodded numbly, still stunned. When he left Mike's office, it felt as though the world had shifted. The familiar streets of his hometown seemed strange and threatening. Every face he passed might be hiding dark secrets. In the days that followed, David lived a strange double life. By day, he gradually resumed his duties at the company, working side by side with Veronica. Each smile and touch from her now waited with suspicion. By night, he met secretly with Mike, reviewing every new detail from the investigation. Veronica, meanwhile, was not blind to the subtle changes in David's behavior. She noticed the lingering stares, the hesitations in conversation, the way he sometimes flinched from her touch. One afternoon, while David was in a meeting, Veronica did something she hadn't done in years. She snooped through his office. Hidden in a locked drawer, she found a file full of newspaper clippings about Chloe. Veronica's blood ran cold. She had always known this day might come, but the reality was more terrifying than anything she'd imagined. With trembling hands, Veronica picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd sworn never to use again. "We need to talk," she said as soon as the call connected. "I think David found out about Chloe." Meanwhile, in Harmony Creek, life went on much the same for Chloe. Her mornings were filled with art lessons from a local teacher who was captivated by her talent. Afternoons were spent painting in Marty's garden, the air fragrant with blooming flowers. During one sunny afternoon, Kim, the social worker, made an unexpected visit. "Marty," she called, her tone serious. "May I speak with you in private?" Marty's heart tightened. She recognized that tone, one that signaled change, often not for the better. "Of course, Kim." "Chloe, dear, keep painting. We'll be right back." Once inside, Kim got straight to the point. "I received a call from a private investigator today. He's looking into Chloe's past." Marty paled. "What? But why? After all this time?" Kim sighed, sitting at the kitchen table. Apparently, Chloe's biological father saw her on a national broadcast. He believes she's his missing daughter. Marty felt like the world was spinning. "No," she whispered. "They can't take her. She's my daughter now." Kim placed a comforting hand on Marty's. "No one will take Chloe unless it's what's best for her. But Marty, if this man is truly her father, he has rights. And Chloe, she deserves to know the truth about her past." Marty nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "I know. I always knew this day might come. I'm not ready to lose her." Kim gave a sad smile. "No one's talking about losing anyone yet. For now, all we can do is cooperate with the investigation and be there for Chloe." Meanwhile, the investigator Mike had hired was making significant progress. By interviewing local residents and carefully combing through city records, he finally obtained Marty and Chloe's exact address. When Mike received the information, he knew he had to act quickly. He called David to an urgent meeting. "We found her, David," Mike said as soon as David walked into his office. "We have the exact address." David felt his legs give way. He leaned on Mike's desk, his heart hammering. "When can we go?" Mike hesitated. "David, you need to understand something. This is delicate. Chloe has spent a whole life away from you. She has a new family, a new identity. We can't just show up and pull her from that." David nodded, though every fiber of his being screamed to run to his daughter. "I understand, Mike. What do you suggest?" "I'll contact the local social services," Mike explained. "We'll go through the proper channels. Meanwhile, I suggest you prepare yourself, psychologically, emotionally. This won't be easy for anyone involved." David spent the next few days in a state of restless agitation. He could barely sleep or eat, his thoughts consumed by Chloe. How would she react upon seeing him? Would she recognize him? Would she forgive him for failing to find her sooner? Veronica observed the shift in David's behavior with mounting apprehension. She knew her time was running out. One evening, while David was in the shower, she made a frantic phone call. "They found her," she whispered into the phone. "I need you to take care of this now." The response on the other end was curt and cold. "Consider it done." But fate had other plans. The following morning, before Mike could begin the official process, David made an impulsive decision. He couldn't wait one more day to see his daughter. Without telling anyone, not even Mike, David got in his car and started the long drive to Harmony Creek. The hours on the road blurred in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. When he finally arrived in the tiny town, David felt like he had entered another world. The peaceful streets, the quaint houses, it all seemed out of a storybook where his lost princess had found refuge. Following the directions he had memorized from Mike's file, David came to a modest house with a lovely garden. His heart nearly stopped when he saw a familiar figure sitting in a wheelchair among the flowers, a paintbrush in one hand and a canvas in front of her. Legs trembling, David got out of his car. Each step toward the garden gate felt like an eternity. He barely noticed the older woman who came out of the house, her face a mix of confusion and worry at the approaching stranger. "Chloe," David called, his voice thick with emotion. "Chloe, my darling." The girl in the garden turned her head, her blue eyes, so much like her mother's, widening in surprise. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then a flicker of recognition crossed Chloe's face. Her lips moved, forming a word David couldn't hear but could see clearly. "Daddy." The paintbrush slipped from Chloe's hand, staining the grass below with color. Marty rushed to Chloe's side, placing herself protectively between the girl and the stranger. "Who are you?" Marty demanded, her voice trembling slightly. "What do you want?" David couldn't tear his eyes from Chloe, but he forced himself to look at Marty. "My name is David Hayes. I'm Chloe's father." Marty went pale, her arms instinctively tightening around Chloe's shoulders. "No," she whispered. "That can't be." Chloe seemed to be in a trance, her eyes locked on David, a storm of emotion washing over her features. Confusion, fear, hope. "Daddy?" she repeated, louder this time. Is it really you?" David took another step forward, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, my love. It's me. I found you. I finally found you." The world around them seemed to dissolve. There was no garden, no house, no town, only a father and daughter, separated by years of pain and absence, finally reunited. Yet, as that moment of reconnection unfolded, greater forces were at work. Veronica, having discovered David's sudden departure, was in a panic. She knew her time was up. With shaking hands, she started packing, determined to disappear before the full truth came to light. And somewhere on the road to Harmony Creek, a dark car sped forward, its driver determined to carry out Veronica's orders to stop the reunion at any cost. The fate of all involved hung by a thread, and the coming hours would decide whether truth would prevail or more lies would be spun to keep the past buried. Time seemed to stand still in Marty's small garden. David and Chloe stared at one another, years of separation and heartbreak distilled into a single, fragile moment of recognition. Marty hovered by Chloe's side, her body tense, ready to protect the girl who had become her daughter in every sense but blood. It was Chloe who finally broke the standstill. With a sudden movement that startled everyone, she unlocked her wheelchair and, using the raw strength of pure emotion, propelled herself toward David. "Daddy!" she cried, tears flooding her face. "Daddy!" David sank to his knees, his arms open wide to catch his daughter. The impact nearly toppled him, but he held steady, wrapping Chloe in a desperate, clinging embrace. Both of them sobbed, releasing years of longing and sorrow in that single, cathartic reunion. "My Chloe," David murmured through his own tears, one hand cradling her head while the other clung to her tightly. "My sweet girl, I found you. I finally found you." Marty watched with a swirling mix of emotions: relief that Chloe was finally reunited with her father, fear of losing the child who had become her life's focus, and a sharp twinge of jealousy at the undeniable bond between this father and daughter. After what felt like an eternity, David loosened his hold slightly, cupping Chloe's face in his hands and gazing deep into her eyes. "Chloe, my love," he said, his voice shaking with emotion, "we were so worried. Veronica and I searched everywhere for you. I never I never stopped hoping I'd find you." The name Veronica fell like a bomb into that moment of reunion. Chloe, who had until then been lost in the joy of seeing her father, stiffened visibly. Her eyes, brimming with happiness just seconds ago, now filled with a dark mixture of fear and anger. "Veronica," she whispered, her voice trembling. Then, with a force that stunned everyone, she screamed, "She was the one! She abandoned me!" David recoiled as if slapped. "What? No, Chloe, there must be some mistake. Veronica? She loved you? She was devastated when you disappeared?" Chloe shook her head violently, tears of rage mixing with those of joy. "No. She took me for a drive, drove for hours. Then she left me alone on the road, in the dark. I screamed for her. 'Daddy!' I screamed, but she never came back." David's world disintegrated as Chloe's words echoed in his mind, shattering the image of Veronica he had clung to for all these years. He recalled Mike's suspicions, the inconsistencies in Veronica's story, the fact she'd never seemed as distraught as he was over Chloe's disappearance. "No," he murmured, as much to himself as to anyone else. "It can't be true." Marty, who had been watching quietly, stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes," she said gently, "I found Chloe that night. She was alone, terrified, abandoned on a rural road. There were no signs of a kidnapping or an accident, just abandonment." David felt his legs give out. He leaned against Chloe's wheelchair for support, his mind reeling at the enormity of what he was hearing. How had he been so blind? How could he have missed the truth right in front of him all these years? At that agonizing moment of revelation, a car screeched to a halt outside the house. Veronica hurried out, her eyes wild with panic as she took in the scene. "David!" she called, her voice trembling. "What's going on here?" The sound of Veronica's voice made Chloe visibly recoil. She clung to David, burying her face in his chest as if trying to disappear. David rose slowly, placing himself protectively in front of Chloe. The eyes that once looked at Veronica with love and trust now burned cold with anger. "Veronica," he said, his voice low and full of menace, "is there something you'd like to tell us?" Veronica glanced frantically between David and Chloe, then at Marty. She forced a smile, but it was clearly a mask. "What are you talking about, dear?" she tried, her voice sickly sweet. "I'm so happy we found Chloe. It's a miracle." Chloe made a sound that was half sob, half furious cry. "Liar!" she screamed. "You left me. You said I was a burden, that you didn't want to be my mother." Veronica blanched but kept denying it. "Chloe, honey, you must be confused. I would never do that. We loved you so much." "Enough, Veronica!" David roared, years of pent-up rage and betrayal finally coming to a head. "Stop lying. Chloe remembers. Marty found her, abandoned. All the evidence points to you. How could you do this to our daughter?" Veronica, seeing her facade crumble, switched tactics. Her eyes filled with crocodile tears. "David, you don't understand. I wasn't well. The pressure of caring for a child with special needs. I didn't know what I was doing." But David was past listening. Years of guilt, heartbreak, and drunken despair had boiled into a cold fury. He advanced toward Veronica, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "You destroyed our lives," he hissed. "You abandoned a defenseless child, my daughter. Then you pretended to mourn. You consoled me. You took control of my company while I drowned in alcohol, devastated by the loss you caused." Veronica shrank back, genuine fear finally flickering in her eyes. She glanced around, searching for a way to escape. But before she could move, the wail of sirens filled the air. 2 police cars and an unmarked vehicle pulled up in front of the house. From the latter emerged Detective Mike Reynolds, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "David," Mike called out, his voice calm but firm. "We got an anonymous tip. Looks like we all have a lot to discuss." Veronica, realizing she was cornered, made one final desperate attempt. She turned and ran for her car. "Stop! one of the officers shouted, drawing his weapon. But Veronica did not stop. She reached her car door, about to open it, when Mike caught her arm. "Veronica Sterling," he said, his tone all authority. "You're under arrest for the abandonment of Chloe Hayes and for obstruction of justice." As Veronica was handcuffed and placed in the police cruiser, David sank to his knees beside Chloe, holding her protectively. "It's all right now, my love," he whispered. "Daddy's here. Nobody will hurt you again." Chloe sobbed softly, years of fear and confusion finally pouring out. Marty approached hesitantly, placing a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder. "Mr. Hayes," she said gently, "I think we all have a lot to talk about." David nodded, looking at Marty with gratitude. "Yes, we do, and please call me David." Mike approached them, his face composed, but his eyes showing the emotion of the scene. "David," he said, "we need everyone's statements. And Chloe, I know it's hard, but we'll need your account of that night, everything you remember." Chloe nodded bravely, clinging to David. "I'll tell," she said, her voice small but determined. "I'll tell everything." In the hours that followed, Marty's small home turned into a makeshift investigation center. With unwavering support from David and Marty, Chloe recounted the events of that dreadful night. Each word was a knife in David's heart, but he remained strong for his daughter. Marty provided her own perspective, detailing how she had found Chloe and the challenges they had faced in those early days. Kim, the social worker, arrived soon after, bringing years of records and observations of Chloe's progress. Meanwhile, at the local police station, Veronica faced a grueling interrogation. Confronted with overwhelming evidence and Chloe's testimony, her defenses collapsed completely. "I couldn't take it anymore," she sobbed. "The responsibility, the constant needs. I just wanted my life back. I thought someone would find her right away. I never meant." But her words rang hollow in light of the enormity of her crime. Back at Marty's, once all the statements were collected and the initial formalities completed, a heavy silence fell over the group. The sheer reality of the situation was finally settling in. David, emotionally and physically spent, looked from Chloe to Marty. "What happens now?" he asked, uncertainty thick in his voice. Mike, gathering up his notes, looked up. "Legally, David, you have every right to Chloe." But he paused, glancing at the obvious bond between Chloe and Marty. "This is a unique situation. I think the best thing is for you to talk and decide what's best for Chloe." Marty's heart constricted. The thought of losing Chloe was almost unbearable, but she knew she couldn't be selfish. "Chloe needs her father," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "She deserves to have her real family." Chloe, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. I can't lose either of you," she said, looking from David to Marty. "You're both my family." A wave of emotion swept over David as he heard his daughter's words. He turned to Marty, no longer seeing a rival, but an ally, someone who loved Chloe as much as he did. "Marty," he said, his voice husky, "you gave Chloe the love and care I couldn't. You're as much her mother as I am her father. Maybe we can figure out a way to make this work, together." Marty's eyes widened in surprise, brimming with gratitude. You really mean that?" David nodded. "Chloe needs both of us. And I need to learn to be a father again. I can't think of anyone better to guide me than you." Chloe, hearing the conversation between the two adults she loved most, felt a surge of relief and happiness. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe and cherished. Mike, watching with a quiet smile, cleared his throat. "Well, it sounds like the two of you have a lot to discuss and plan. For now, I suggest everyone get some rest. The coming days will be intense, with legal proceedings and everything else." When Mike and the other officers finally left, leaving David, Chloe, and Marty alone, a new feeling filled the air. It was a mix of exhaustion, relief, and the promise of a new beginning. David knelt once more beside Chloe's wheelchair, taking her hands in his. "My darling," he said softly, "I know we've been through a lot today. I know you must be confused and scared. But I want you to know I love you more than anything in this world, and from now on, I promise I will do everything in my power to make you happy and keep you safe." Chloe, tears in her eyes, hugged her father. "I love you, Daddy. I missed you so much." Marty watched them, her heart full of both joy and sadness. Sensing Marty's mixed emotions, David reached out and offered her his hand. "Marty," he said, "I can't thank you enough for what you've done for Chloe. You're an essential part of her life now, and I want you to know you have a place in our family. Always." Marty took David's hand, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, David. She's my whole world. I'm so glad she has you back in her life." Chloe, still hugging David, extended one arm to pull Marty into their embrace. For a moment, the three of them stayed like that, united in a hug that symbolized the start of a new family, formed through adversity and bound by their unconditional love for Chloe. As night fell over the small town of Harmony Creek, a new story began, a story of redemption, second chances, and the transformative power of love. David, Chloe, and Marty had a long road ahead, with many challenges to overcome. But in that moment, huddled together in Marty's living room, they knew that together they could face whatever the future held. Meanwhile, somewhere in a detention cell, Veronica faced the consequences of her actions, the weight of her crimes finally bearing down on her. The truth, buried for so long, had finally come to light, bringing the promise of justice and the possibility of healing to those she had so deeply wronged. The chapter of lies and betrayals had ended. A new chapter, filled with hope and possibility, was just beginning for the newly reunited Hayes-Johnson family. Marty's once quiet garden was now buzzing with activity. Police officers came and went, their muffled voices mixing with the wail of distant sirens. At the center of it all, Veronica stood in handcuffs, eyes wide with panic, while Detective Mike Reynolds held her firmly by the arm. "Not so fast, Mrs. Sterling," Mike said, his voice carrying a threatening calm. "We have a lot to go over." David, still holding Chloe in his arms, watched the scene with a mix of shock and anger. Marty stood beside them, one protective hand on Chloe's shoulder. Mike motioned to one of the officers, who approached with a thick folder. "Veronica Sterling," he began, his voice now resonating so all could hear over the garden, "over the past few months, we conducted an exhaustive investigation, not only into Chloe's disappearance, but also into your past." Veronica's face turned white, her eyes darting frantically between Mike and David. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. "This is absurd." Mike opened the folder, revealing several documents. "We have evidence suggesting that your connection to the Hayes family began long before you married David." He paused, his gaze hardening. "In fact, our evidence indicates that you orchestrated the accident that killed Alice Davies, David's first wife." A stunned silence fell over the garden. David felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath his feet. Chloe let out a small cry of distress, burying her face in her father's chest. That's impossible," David whispered, his voice shaking. Mike pressed on relentlessly. "We have sworn statements from an accomplice, Mr. Tommy Russo, who claims he was hired by you to sabotage Alice's car. Additionally, our finance team uncovered a series of suspicious transactions linking you to Russo in the weeks leading up to the accident." Veronica, who had been in shock, suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. "You have no idea," she said between sobs and laughter. "You have no idea what it's like to want something so desperately that you'd do anything to get it." David gently released Chloe, entrusting her to Marty's care, and stepped toward Veronica, his face contorted with pain and fury. "Why?" he asked in a barely audible voice. "Why did you do it?" Veronica looked at him, her eyes now cold and calculating. "Because I deserved it all, David. The life you had with Alice, the company, everything. I worked hard, dedicated my life to that company, and then you go and marry her, and she's handed everything on a platter." She shook her head. "No, I decided it was my turn to get what I wanted." Chloe, who had been listening, suddenly spoke, her voice trembling but clear. "What about me? Why did you abandon me?" Veronica looked at Chloe, and for a moment something like remorse flickered in her eyes. Then it vanished, replaced by a chilling indifference. "You were a constant reminder, Chloe. A reminder of Alice, of everything I tried to erase. And your needs, they got in the way of my plans for the company, for my life with David." Marty, horrified by these revelations, placed a protective arm around Chloe. "How could you?" she breathed. She was only a child. Mike signaled to his officers. "Veronica Sterling, you are under arrest for first-degree murder, attempted murder, child abandonment, fraud, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." As Veronica was taken to the squad car, David remained motionless, as though frozen in time. The extent of her betrayal was almost impossible to process. Not only had she abandoned his daughter, but the death of Alice, the event that had shattered his life, had been orchestrated by the woman he had trusted to help him move past that loss. Chloe gently disengaged from Marty's hold and rolled toward her father. "Daddy?" she called softly. The sound of Chloe's voice snapped David out of his stupor. He turned, tears coursing down his cheeks, and wrapped his arms around his daughter. "I'm sorry, Chloe," he choked out. "I'm so sorry I didn't protect you, that I didn't see the truth." Marty approached them, laying a reassuring hand on David's shoulder. "No one could have foreseen this, David," she said softly. "What matters is that you're together now." Mike, finished directing his officers, approached the trio. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said gently, "but we'll need detailed statements from all of you in the coming days. For now, I suggest you rest and process everything." David nodded numbly. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Veronica will be booked at the station," Mike explained. "She'll face multiple charges, and given the severity, she's unlikely to get bail pending trial. As for you," he looked at David, Chloe, and Marty, "I recommend staying together. You'll need each other in the days ahead." Marty immediately spoke up. "My home is open to both of you. David, you and Chloe can stay here for as long as you need." David looked at Marty with profound gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply, his words laden with emotion. As night fell over Harmony Creek, news of the day's events spread quickly. Curious neighbors gathered nearby, and before long the first reporters arrived, lured by the promise of a sensational scandal. Kim, the social worker who had followed Chloe's case for years, arrived soon after, her eyes wide with concern. "I just heard," she told Marty. "How is Chloe doing?" Marty heaved a deep sigh. "Shaken, like all of us. But she's strong. We'll get through this together." Inside the house, David sat on the couch, Chloe curled up in his arms. The girl had finally succumbed to emotional and physical exhaustion, falling into a fitful sleep. David gently stroked her hair, his eyes distant with thoughts. Marty entered quietly, carrying a tray with tea. "I thought you could use this," she offered, setting the tray on the coffee table. David looked at her, gratitude shining in his tired eyes. "How can I ever thank you, Marty, for everything you did for Chloe, for taking us in now?" Marty sat beside him, her voice gentle but firm. "There's no need to thank me, David. Chloe is, well, she's my daughter too, in a sense. Now you're both family to me." David nodded, a wave of emotion swelling within him. "Family," he repeated, the word carrying immense significance. "I guess we'll all need to support each other now, more than ever." Outside, Mike gave a brief statement to the gathered press. "We're dealing with a complex, sensitive case," he said. "I ask that you respect the privacy of the victims during this difficult time. More information will be released in due course." In the days that followed, the story exploded in national news. "The Hayes Scandal. Murder, abandonment, and unbridled ambition," cried the headlines. Chloe's story, the young art prodigy who'd been abandoned by her stepmother after her mother's murder, captured the public's imagination. David, still trying to process everything, had to contend with the fallout at Hayes Industries. An emergency board meeting was called, and he found himself explaining the situation to shocked shareholders. "I realize this casts a shadow over our company," he said, exhaustion evident in his voice but tempered with new resolve. "But I assure you, we will take all necessary steps to restore confidence in our leadership and integrity." Meanwhile, Chloe found solace in her artwork. Hour after hour, she painted, her canvases now filled with somber colors and turbulent shapes that mirrored the turmoil in her soul. Marty watched with concern, but also relief that Chloe had a means to channel her emotions. "It's amazing how she can express so much through painting," Marty observed one evening, watching Chloe work. David nodded, his eyes fixed on his daughter. "She has an extraordinary gift. I think art saved her, in many ways." As the weeks passed, life began to settle into a new normal. David embarked on intensive therapy to deal with the double betrayal he'd endured. Chloe continued with her art therapy sessions, slowly beginning to talk about her repressed feelings and memories. The people of Harmony Creek rallied around the family, offering support and shielding them from the relentless media intrusion. Neighbors brought meals, and the local school arranged for homebound instruction for Chloe until the clamor died down. Veronica's trial became a media spectacle. Each day brought new, shocking revelations. Tommy Russo's testimony described in detail how Veronica had meticulously plotted Alice's accident. Financial records revealed years of manipulation and fraud. David, required to testify, faced Veronica for the first time since her arrest. Their eyes locked briefly, and David saw nothing. No remorse, no emotion, only a cold void that made him shudder. "She never cared," he told Marty later that night, his voice breaking. "All these years, our entire marriage. It was all a lie." Marty laid a comforting hand on his arm. "But the love you share with Chloe, the love she has for you, that's real, David. That's what you two need to focus on now." As the trial wore on, Hayes Industries underwent a massive restructuring. Determined to clear his company's name and rebuild its integrity, David brought in external auditors and implemented new transparency measures. Chloe, inspired by everything that had happened, began work on a series of paintings she called Journey to the Truth. Each canvas told a part of her story: the accident, the abandonment, the years with Marty, reuniting with her father, and the shattering revelations. The series captivated art critics who praised its emotional depth and technical maturity. Finally, after weeks of testimony, the verdict was announced. Veronica was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to multiple decades in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, David felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't the end of his healing process, far from it, but it was an important step forward. That night, David, Chloe, and Marty sat together on Marty's porch, watching the sunset. Chloe, nestled between the two, held both of their hands. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small but full of hope. David exchanged a glance with Marty before answering. "Now, my love, we heal. Together, as a family." Marty smiled gently, squeezing Chloe's hand. "And we build something new, something beautiful, out of all this pain." In the weeks and months that followed, the newly formed family began to chart a path toward recovery. David, inspired by Chloe's journey and Marty's unwavering support, decided to establish a foundation in Alice's name. The Alice Davies Foundation would focus on helping traumatized children through art therapy and other support services. Chloe, now 9, continued to flourish artistically. Her Journey to the Truth series was displayed in a local gallery, drawing national attention. Critics and art lovers alike were awed by the emotional intensity and technical prowess of someone so young. Each painting tells a story, Chloe explained during the exhibition's opening, her voice soft but confident. It's my story, but it's also the story of anyone who's faced hardships and found the strength to move forward. David, watching his daughter with pride, felt tears welling up. Beside him stood Marty, her arm linked with his in a silent gesture of support. The Harmony Creek community continued to be a pillar of support for the family. One night, they organized a special ceremony to honor Marty for saving and raising Chloe. "Marty Johnson isn't just a hero to Chloe," the mayor declared during the ceremony. "She's a hero to our entire community, an example of the power of love and compassion." Marty, usually reserved, was overcome by the recognition. "I only did what anyone would do," she said, her voice quavering. "Chloe saved me as much as I saved her." As time went on, the wounds began to slowly heal. Through intensive therapy and the unconditional love of Chloe and Marty, David learned to forgive himself for not seeing the truth about Veronica. He devoted himself not only to his newly formed family, but also, through the foundation, to helping others avoid the kind of pain they had endured.